Welcome, 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 Graham.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. It's great to see so many of you as well, and I just I just love being around entrepreneurs, because to me they are the most important people on the planet. They create businesses, they build wealth, they create jobs, they pay taxes, they make a difference. So to me, governments and politicians should be rolling out the red carpet to us as entrepreneurs. It doesn't always happen that way, but if there's any justice in the world, I think there would. So delighted to be here, and also to learn more about the kind of businesses people are involved in, and what kind of finances they're looking for, what some of their challenges are, and see whether we can help with any of that.
Well, thank you so much for showing up. But to be honest, until you showed up, I was still thinking, I don't know yet until I see him in the room, because even as I said, I was earlier in this event and I said, I have to leave. I have this amazing special guest in my masterclass, and I showed a couple of them. I said, oh, I heard he's coming to the conference. Is that true? He said, yeah, I've been trying to find a way how to connect with this guy. How on earth you managed to get him? I said, I don't know if I've got him yet until I see him in the room.
Well, you've got me. I'm here. So so please, let me know what I can do. How do you like to start?
Thank you so much, because I know your time is very limited. How about you tell us, because you are a TV star as well, but how did you enter the world of investment? What is your experience and your background in the world, in this industry?
Yeah, well, it's actually a rather painful process, because I was quite late actually coming into being an entrepreneur and a business owner. I had a 25-year corporate career, and I ended up as a director of a big American company called Texas Instruments, and I was running a kind of software division for them, and I was making very good money, but I didn't really have the time or the inclination to manage it. So on the advice of a colleague, I gave my life savings to a professional wealth manager. We're talking about the second half of the 1990s now, and they put it all into the NASDAQ in America, which at the time it was going gangbusters. Every day I'd wake up $2,000 or $3,000 richer than when I went to bed, and I thought this was brilliant. And every year I'd go for my valuation with these wealth managers, and they'd show me how much richer I was. And then we had the millennium. And if anyone's old enough to remember that, everyone thought planes were going to be crashing out of the sky and so on. And none of that happened, but we did see a fall in the NASDAQ. So that summer, June 2000, I went to see them and said, this doesn't look so good. Should we take some money off the table and do something else? And they said, don't be such a wimp. Don't you recognize a small correction in a raging bull market when you see one? I said, okay, you're the experts. And I went off on my world travels for another year with my job, came back in 2001, and they took me into a little room, and I no longer saw the boss. I saw his sidekick, and he took me in and said, unfortunately, the NASDAQ's gone a lot further down. You've lost £180,000. And unfortunately, your net worth is now below the level at which we look after clients. So we're going to have to let you go. So wow. I was fired by my own wealth manager for the losses they had made on my behalf in 2001. And that was what started me on the journey, thinking, I can't do any worse than that. And so I started going to seminars, reading books, really trying to become self-educated about it, making my own investment decisions. And eventually in 2009, just after the financial crash, bought my first investment-related business, and have grown it ever since then into what is now both at private equity. So it was actually very painful personal experience that started me on the road, and really, I suppose, motivated me to try and help others avoid having to have such a painful and expensive lesson about the fact that nobody cares about your financial future except you. Even wow. if you have professional advisors, you are not at the top of their agenda. So I feel that, we all have a duty to take ownership of our finances and our financial future. really because no one else cares about it, and we're the only ones who do. So that was my story in the 3-minute version.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing it. That's powerful, because sometimes we see successful people and we think that, oh, it has been so easy for them. It has been something that probably somebody else has helped them, or they're lucky. But somehow you're telling us that, in fact, like all successful stories that we hear, people like you experience some kind of breakthrough or a wake-up call to understand that you have to touch really the dark zone, so then you can understand the power of your light. And so what happened next? You had that wake-up call.
Yeah, I mean, if you imagine how I felt, I had to go back and explain to my wife that we'd lost a big part of our life savings. I was angry, I was embarrassed. But I tell you what, ultimately, when I'd processed it all, I realized that ultimately it was all my own fault, because I hadn't just delegated my wealth management to these guys, I had abdicated it. And I just turned up once a year.
So you didn't go to blame, it's not my fault, and accuse
no,
other
I didn't.
people.
And this is an important.
Sometimes this is what we hear. It's not my fault.
No, well, it's an important lesson, I think, for all entrepreneurs, that ultimately you are to blame, for everything that succeeds in your business and everything that fails in your business. It's all your fault, so blaming others is really not going to get you anywhere. So yeah, for me, it was a case of, okay, that's what the professionals have done. I can't do any worse than that. So then I just started studying. I started subscribing to money magazines, as I say, going to seminars, reading lots of books. I took some false turns. I tried trading the stock markets, and I soon realized I don't really have a trader's mentality. I don't want to be stuck to a screen 18 hours a day looking for little blips in charts and things. I'm kind of a buy and hold investor, so part of all this is learning about yourself, and learning what appeals to you, and what you can live with, what your risk tolerance is, learning about new markets so you can diversify. Most people, for example, put far too much money into their home market, and don't look at things abroad as much as they should. And my argument is you need to treat the whole world as your kind of chessboard, and you make your moves on that chessboard. And just as a crazy example, the best performing stock market in the whole of last year was Turkey. Now, you might not have expected in January 2022 to be learning that you should put your money into Turkey. And there's perhaps some reasons why you wouldn't as well. But, the point is that you've got to understand these things and make your decisions based on a wider knowledge than most people seem to be prepared to have.
So what I'm learning here is that nobody's coming to put it into the table, any opportunity for you. You have to study, you have to educate yourself, you have to work hard, you have to create the opportunities, and you have to fall down and do it again and do it again, and you don't give up. So somehow we understand the formula, but when it comes to the funding, it looks like we women have some kind of baggages from the past, like some kind of subconscious barriers that, it's impossible for us, this is not going to happen to me. So it's a kind of imposter syndrome. So what is your experience in your circle? Why, I believe you work with both women and men in your circle. So is there any difference when it comes to the self-belief, self-confidence on the world of investment?
It's fascinating, actually, because a lot of the people that we have, just for people that don't know, we actually run as a kind of private members club. So we have about 700 people in about, I think, 37 countries. And most of them are typically successful people in whatever their field is. It could be a business, it could be professions. A lot of them have been property investors. But it's interesting, we do a planning service with them that we call a Wealth 360. And often they are very concentrated. A lot of Brits love property, Brits love bricks and mortar. So, they're always overweight in property and underweight in other things. And so I have to spend a lot of time trying to persuade people that they should be a bit more adventurous. They should, move beyond their comfort zone and all that sort of thing. But in terms of their mindset, and in terms of their role as entrepreneurs, I think it's evolving and changing. We're about 30% female in our membership, 70% male, and that the female element is increasing. And what I'm seeing is more and more women now are successful in business and therefore looking at their investment portfolio.
Graham, tell us a little bit more about Buford Private Equity. And yeah, I can, of course, I can understand that with a leader with you, like you, it's opening opportunities for more women to understand how they can be part of it. And probably in this community, we may have women who one day, or probably now, they can meet the criteria and see how they can be part of it.
Sure. Yeah. Well, essentially, we have a private members club. We are for high net worth investors, which is a qualification that the regulator, the FCA, puts in place. It's not as bad as people think. People think you have to be a billionaire or something, but to qualify, you either need to earn £100,000 a year, or you have an investment portfolio of 250,000 outside of your main home and your pension. So anyone, for example, that has a buy-to-let portfolio,
I think everybody in this room is qualified for that then. Absolutely.
Yeah. So the first thing is that's the kind of bar, if you like, for entry. But yeah, so then what we do is we provide all kinds of content. I do a weekly video on any subject to do with anything from politics and economics to investing, anything I think people should be aware of. I do a weekly video on that. We do a quarterly newsletter, physical newsletter that we post to people when there's not a postal strike on. We do live events and all the rest of it. So a lot of it is around education, but the really fun part of my job is looking for new investments, and that takes me all over the place. Just before Christmas I was in Dubai, and we've come back from there with some interesting new investments. So there's I always position it, I think when we met at the London event, I said this in my talk, that there are two heroes in our story, if you like. There are the people who've been so successful in their business or their profession that they've got liquid funds available to invest, and then there are the entrepreneurs who've built such amazing businesses that they're worth investing in. And that there's an awful lot of businesses out there, but by no means all of them are worth investing in. So we spend
how do you typically evaluate the potential investment opportunity?
Firstly, they broadly fall into two areas. We have the kind of growth investments, where you're looking to buy shares in a private company that you think is going to increase in value a lot. Or we have income investments, where you're looking at things like bonds and loan notes, where you're going to get a regular income, a coupon from them. And we look at those in a slightly different way. So for a growth company, we're looking at what's the potential scale of growth? What's their addressable market? What are they doing that's different? What's the quality of the management team like? How much have they proven themselves with a track record? And if you look across the whole end-to-end investment process, there are a series of distinct stages you go through. And one of the things I think that would be relevant for the group tonight is to understand where you're at in that process, and therefore what the most relevant form of finance would be. And I would say this before we even get into all of that, and it might sound obvious, but it's a question I often find myself asking entrepreneurs, which is, are you clear on what you want? Are you clear on what success looks like? Because if, sake of argument, you're some kind of well-being practitioner, maybe you charge £100 an hour and you do 20 sessions a week, that's 100,000 a year income. And that might be absolutely fine for you. That might be what you want. That might fund the lifestyle you're looking for.
Nothing wrong with that, yeah?
Nothing wrong with that, but it's a completely uninvestable business because it has no growth, it has no scalability.
Then it is something wrong with that. Well, because I always say, if you have the capacity to grow, it's not allowed for you to think, I'm staying here.
Indeed, but recognize that for some people that's what they want, and if you want to grow a business, if you say no, I want a 10 million, 100 million pound business, and be clear on that, that's what I'm saying. So the first stage is knowing what you want as an outcome, what you see as success. The second stage, I think, then is looking at your business model in terms of how does it grow? How do you get revenue in? How do you make profit? You know, how would extra funds help you to grow it faster? Or would they help you to develop more technology? What are the value multiples, the value drivers in your business? So, for example, we've seen recently in recent years that technology businesses have achieved really high valuations because people see that you're building a platform, and then that platform becomes relatively not cheap to operate, but the costs of the platform remain constant. And the more business you add to it, the profit starts going up exponentially. And that's why it becomes viewed as a very valuable business. And now that took a bit of a setback last year when inflation and interest rates started rising, because what happens then is people discount the value of future cash flows, and therefore they're willing to pay less for those cash flows today. So the reason that the Googles and the Amazons and all those, the Facebooks have been crashing in the last 12 months is because of inflation and rising interest rates, as much as anything wrong with those businesses themselves. So understanding your business model is key, and understanding where you are in the process. So for example, if you're in the early stages, it's what I call the 3 Fs. It's the founder, the friends, and the family.
Okay, ladies, write it down. The founder, the friends, and the family. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's stage 1 essentially. And when it comes to getting private investors into your company later on, one of the key metrics that we would look for is how much skin in the game do you have? How much have you put into this? Have you, for example, put your house on the line? Now, some people will say that's not a good thing to do. Some people will say, well, that's a great sign of commitment. So there's nothing worse than having somebody come to me saying, we need to raise £1 million. And I say, well, what have you put in so far? Oh, well, I haven't put anything in myself. I spent 100 quid setting a company up. You've got to be seen to have put something substantial into the business yourself, or through your friends and family. And typically that gets you to what you might call the prototype stage, or the minimum viable product stage, the proof of concept. Whatever the thing is that you're doing, that gets it to the point where you could show it to an investor and say, look, it works. Better still, if you've got to the point where you're generating revenue from it, you're actually bringing in customers. That is another whole level, if you like, because a lot of people start looking for funding when they're...
Can you discuss a particularly successful investment you have made in the past so we can understand how it works?
Yeah, sure.
If possible.
Yeah, I'll take one that it actually is, there's a lot of lessons embedded in this because of what's gone on in the last 12 months. But first point I'll make is how you always have to have your antennae tuned, if you like, for what opportunities there could be to find capital. Because when I tell you how I met the founder of this company, it's kind of serendipity squared. So we both, before I moved to Portugal, I went to a church in Hampton Wick near Kingston, and the church organized an entrepreneurs group. And a lot of them were what you might call solopreneurs. They were IT contractors or coaches or so on. But one guy that I met there was a senior executive at BP, a big oil company in the UK. And he said, I'm leaving BP to set up a green and alternative energy company, but I need £1 million. I said, I might be able to help with that. So he and his friends and family had put in already, I think, about 300,000. They got to the point where they had all their licenses, because you have to have licenses to be in the energy supply business in the UK. But they now needed to expand. They needed to hire more of a team. They needed to build a brand. They were also doing something unique because they were automating all the back office processes. When you change your electric supplier, a lot of the companies have got to do manual labor to switch you over. Now they worked with a robotics company to actually automate all of that. So that gave them lower costs of staff. B, it meant they were building intellectual property, which adds value to the business. So there's an important lesson there. And C, it gave me some security for my investors that this was a serious business that was going to make a difference. It was right on message. They called themselves Rebel Energy, and they were, really going to make a difference in the UK industry. And we raised the money for them. I think in the end we raised about 1.2 million. And they got to the point of launch in, I think, August of 2021. And then all hell broke loose in the world's energy markets. I'm sure everyone remembers this. And this was 6 months before Ukraine. The prices went through the roof. The government didn't do anything to help the newer providers. They were locked in with a retail price cap. They couldn't charge their customers more than this, but the wholesale price did this, to the point where they were losing hundreds of pounds for every customer they had. So it was actually the bigger new providers with the more customers got into difficulty. So around about October time, he rang me and said, "I'm sorry, Graham, we're going to have to close the company down and your investors are going to lose all their money." I said, "That's not a good idea. Let's look at what's happening here. Look, the prices have gone sky high. You have hardly got any customers because you've only just launched. Why don't we hibernate the company through the winter and see where we are in the spring?" And he said, "But I need more money to do that." I said, "Okay, how much do you need?" He said, 300,000. So we went back to the investors who'd put 1.2 million in and said, "Look, you've got two choices here. You can either lose everything or you can put another 300 in. We'll get through the winter and see what happens." Thankfully, 24 out of 25 agreed. So we raised the money in about 10 days. They went into hibernation. They came back out into the market in February, March time, and they've been absolutely going gangbusters since then. They're now adding, I think, something like 5,000 customers a month. We got in at valuations between about 6 and 12 million pounds. Every 1,000 customers adds another million to their value. So they're already up, I think, around 50 million. By the end of this year, it'll be over 100 million. So our investors are going to get 10 to 15 times their money back, but it's been a journey, and the role we played was, first of all, to raise the money and then to actually come up with that kind of rescue plan when this enormous black swan event happened. So
incredible.
That's an example for
That's absolutely a great example. Incredible. And how do you approach the risk management in your investment strategy? Because it looks like you have to have some kind of intuition and insight and some luck sometimes. So how do you know?
Because that is true. Yeah. Ultimately, I would say that the biggest single factor is the people. You're always investing in the people, regardless of the technology. In the case of Rebel, he and his team had enormous experience in the industry. They had got all the right contracts and licenses. And the situation now is they're not allowing any new licenses. So, those licenses themselves are hugely valuable. They had a great brand. They had a intellectual property they were developing, and they had a bunch of partnerships that meant they were going to very quickly grow their customer base once they're launched. So in that scenario, every aspect of the business model looked right, the brand, the technology. Another example I would give you is a fintech group that we've raised over 4 million for now. They're actually ex-SAS soldiers who have built a fintech with a couple of potential billion-dollar unicorns in it. And they have a very rigorous kind of military approach to it, but they'd also put a lot of their own money in, had a strong team, very clear route to profitability, channels to market, all of that stuff in place. So the trick is to get in early enough that you can get in at a low valuation, but not so early that it's ultra high risk. So we look for, we focus mainly on growth capital, which means a business has got some sort of track record, but all that's holding it back from explosive growth is having the money to recruit more people, do more marketing, build another piece of technology, whatever it is. So we are some private equity companies focus on startups and seed funding. We focus on growth capital.
Oh, and can you speak to any investment trends or areas of opportunity you are currently focusing on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think certainly during the 2010s, investing was quite easy. You just had to put your money into the American tech stocks and watch it grow every day. I think in the 2020s, we're going to have to be a lot more selective. So today, for example, I just before we came on this call, I've just launched something new to our investors, which is a Swiss-based fund that's investing in aerospace and defense industries. Now, there's part of that, obviously, you can imagine why government defense budgets around the world are increasing massively now. And there are all sorts of companies involved in that. And aerospace, the likes of Elon Musk have really transformed space travel and the economics of launching satellites and things. And what you don't see behind companies like SpaceX or the big aircraft manufacturers like Boeing is there's a whole supply chain universe of other companies that do specialist pieces of that technology. And so they are all in an enormous growth phase at the moment. Boeing themselves have got an 11-year backlog of orders. If you order a plane from them today, it could be 2034 before you get it. It's a $1.8 trillion order book. But behind them are all the companies that supply them, the turbine companies. There's a company in America about to buy another company that makes engines for military missiles, and they're paying 38 times earnings for that company. So these kind of things create enormous opportunities. So aerospace and defense is one. If I looked geographically, I would say, India is an area that's going to grow enormously in this decade. I think China is pretty much uninvestable now, but India, I think, has got enormous potential, got a very young population, a very well-educated population, gradually getting over kind of bureaucracy and things that have held it back. So geographically, we're looking at India. I'm also very keen on precious metals as an alternative to paper money, which is losing value so quickly in this time of inflation. There's always a space for new technology, even where, especially in private hands, you see, there's so much money is now in private equity. There's a lot fewer publicly listed companies than there ever used to be. And those ones have suffered the big declines in the stock market, but the privately held companies have not gone through that pain. So, when you come into one of our companies, you might be invested in it for 3, 4, 5 years, and you can ride out these variations in the market. But in terms of, what your group might be investing in or what businesses they're building, a couple of things I would say. Firstly, it doesn't have to be some brand new idea. You just have to look at the businesses that have been built around a cup of coffee or a pizza to know that you can build global businesses by doing something that already exists better. And there's always scope to do things.
So better. You don't need to invent something new, you're saying?
No, that's in some ways it's the highest risk of all, because you don't know whether the market wants it or not. So an example from our own background, one of our first businesses was a medical weight loss clinic, or a chain of them. And we decided to add to that nutritional therapy clinics, because we felt that people would benefit a lot from the expertise of nutritionists to help them with their diet. But we were probably about a decade too early, because although we had brilliant nutritional therapists who were well qualified, in many cases,
the market probably was not ready.
No, they knew more than doctors and they could really help people. But, people always buy what they want rather than what they need. And we were just ahead of the market. So, so one thing is just try and improve something that's already there. The other thing I would say, and very few people think about this, is, have you thought about buying an existing business rather than starting from scratch? Because there's actually a bit of a crisis going on, certainly in the UK and America at the moment, among baby boomer business owners. Because I'm from the baby boomer generation, as you can see, and a lot of my generation have built businesses, family firms of one sort or another, and their kids have seen how hard they worked, and they don't want to know. They're off doing something else.
I have heard that. Yes,
they're going to be lawyers or social media influencers or something. They don't want to do all this hard work. So they're trying to sell these businesses, but there aren't enough buyers. So if you look at what they want to retire and have a steady income. If you can come along and say, well, look, if I take over your business, I don't have £1 million to give you right now. Well, what if I gave you, 75,000 a year for the next 10 years or something? And you've now got a pension, you've got your freedom, you know that your child, your baby that you've built is in safe hands because we've got to know each other and like each other. So why don't I take it off your hands? I'll give you a bit of money up front, but I'll also—
I like that idea. Do you know somebody? I would like to buy a business like that.
Well, just look at businessesforsale.com. There are thousands of them. But the point is, it's a human interaction. You've got to meet them, you've got to build rapport, you've got to show them that you'd be able to look after their business. And I tell you, I've actually never started a business from scratch. I've always bought an existing business, ideally with a database of clients, and then I've built on it. I've added new products and services into it. But starting anything from absolute point zero is the toughest way of being an entrepreneur. And you burn through a lot of cash, you burn through a lot of heartache and effort, and you don't always obviously get the result you're looking for. So if there's a way in which you can, whatever your idea is, if you can actually kickstart it by buying an existing business, you'll find that you get there quicker, and probably, get there ultimately cheaper.
Oh, or you can start a business and make it successful and sell it.
Absolutely, yes. And one of the things that is being done very successfully in a number of sectors at the moment is where it's called an agglomeration model or an aggregation model, where you buy up a series of smallish businesses in the same sector. I've seen this done with veterinary practices looking after animals. I've seen it done with
like Amazon did many years ago. They collected everything in terms of, they started with the books, and now look where they have come.
Well, that's right, but it's slightly different. What I'm saying is, imagine you specialize in one area, like you're a vet, or you want to do nurseries for children. If you start pulling together a portfolio of multiple businesses, multiple small businesses that you've bought directly from their owners, so that you go from one nursery to 10 or 20 nurseries, then the value of that becomes worth more than the sum of the parts, if you like. There are bigger companies that will come along and write you a bigger check. Maybe the best example I can think of in recent years would be Coca-Cola buying Pret a Manger. We've all bought our lunchtime sandwich from Pret. Coca-Cola wanted to enter the coffee shop market, but they didn't want to start from scratch with one or two. So they wrote a multi-billion-dollar check to buy an existing chain someone else had spent 40 years building. Now that's an extreme example at the top of the market, but that happens.
But the
all
concept
the way down.
is fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. So whatever your thing is, if there are existing businesses out there doing it, especially businesses that tend to have more mature owners that are looking to retire, then you could be their savior. You come along and say, I'll take it off your hands. I'll put some kind of what they call, deferred remuneration, deferred compensation plan together. And then what you could then do, maybe if there's a person there that could run it, you could keep the manager and just sack the owner, and then pull together a series of those. And maybe one manager looks after 3 or 4 or 5, whatever the structure is. But you start building a network of businesses that ultimately become significantly valuable from a series of small deals that you pull together like that.
Wow, you are putting some seeds in our mind to start thinking now, and we are not able to sleep on all these ideas that you have given us. It's incredible. Sometimes we complicate things and we think it's so difficult, but hey, if you focus and if you get educated and you be consistent and determined and you know what you want, you're saying that you can get there. That's incredible. And thank you again for your time and everything that you shared today.
Brilliant. Thank you guys. And I'll see you next week if you're coming to the event. Thanks a lot. Bye now.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.